Today I invite you into my Magick Factory where I'm going to make Amazing Attraction, one of my magical sprays right out of my own personal recipe book. I'm very excited about this. This is probably my magnum opus when it comes to making stuff. The Magick Sprays really took off. When I originally started making them, there was only one, and it was called Excellent Energy Spray. That one was to lift the energy. So some people were trying it at night and they weren't able to go to sleep. So we started coming up with all these different formulas, one for relaxation, and then I started coming up with ones that I thought would help me. This one in particular, I use in the store all the time. It's not just necessarily attracting a person or attracting a mate. Maybe you want to attract more business, or you want to attract more knowledge, or just anything that you want to draw to you. This spray is very good for that. A lot of people tend to think it is a fragrance, like a perfume or an oil. And really, the whole thing with a Magick spray is it's supposed to kind of affect your essence. It's supposed to kind of lay around you and add really more to your aura. It's not to change the way that you smell. It's really more to change the frequency that you emit. So you're trying to get into the energy field. So it's typically applied around. The scent is important. This is an attraction spray, so it's going to have a very attractive type of smell. It's going to have some very decadent scents. They are usually the most precious oils, such as rose or jasmine. They're a little harder to get. Out of all of our senses, the olfactory nerve, which governs scent, is the most direct pathway to the brain. So it's going to emit memories very quickly. You're going to have very emotional responses, and the emotions tie in with the water element. So sprays, perfumes, oils. When you're making whatever it is you're trying to do, you have to bring up that emotion in yourself, and that has to go into the spray. So if I want an attraction spray, I want to be attractive, I want to be having a really good time when I make this spray. So I'm going to start the process just by making sure that, first off, I'm in a great mood. Okay, I never make anything when I'm not in the right mood. I want to feel happy, I want to feel attractive, I want to feel like I've treated myself well when I'm making these sprays. For this particular one, this is kind of like romancing somebody on a date. I want to set up everything perfectly. So I've got my little candle going. Sometimes I put out chocolate. Sometimes it'll be something nice to drink. All of that positivity is going to go into it, all of that feeling, all of that essence, because that's what activates it. We can follow a recipe, but if it's not activated properly, so I want to activate it through the way I feel and basically the astrological timing. All of these things are going to come into play to create the perfect essence for this recipe. So now I have to set the stage as if I'm setting this up for the perfect date. So we are going to welcome in all of the elements before we even get started. We're going to go in the order of the course of the day. So it's going to be the east, which would be the air element. Then it's going to be the south, fire element. The west, the water element. For water element, I'm going to add the ultimate witch's brew. It's my coffee, just a little drop, just a little offering, because it tastes good. Coffee, it does a witch good. And then finally, the north, which would be the earth element. I could have put salt in there, some herbs, anything like that. By putting the crystal in it now, I'm going to be creating an elixir from it. And all of that must go into the jar prior to putting anything else in, so it has balance. So the first thing, there does need to be a preservative in it, but we want it to be natural, so we're going to do some vitamin E right in the bottom. We don't want this stuff to turn or go bad. And if you know anything about vitamin E, oil, this is a lot. Okay, this is pure. It's not concentrated with anything else. It's not combined with any other type of oil. And you're seeing I'm putting a great deal in here. So now I'm going to start to add my moon waters or my nature waters. The moon water, and also I have actual Florida water. Just enough moon water to kind of give a nice little layer to the bottom. Then we add the Florida water. Florida water, there's different ways of looking at it. You can create a Florida water, but when I'm saying Florida water, I'm talking Florida water from Florida. This is actually from the Fountain of Youth in St. Augustine, Florida. Okay, and I use that to make Florida water because I want it to be as authentic as possible. The last time I was in Florida, I bought probably about a dozen bottles of it, mailed it back home so I would have it to work with. Most of my vacations center around procuring magical ingredients. And they do offer you a cup to drink when you're in St. Augustine. So I drank some from the Fountain of Youth. I have no idea if it works. We'll find out. If I still look like this in 20 years, we'll say it was a success. And my favorite thing is the mixing it up. Always clockwise because you're trying to build energy. That's pretty good so far. This next step are the floral waters. Floral waters are created by taking the blossom and steaming it, and then the condensation that comes off of that is how you're going to get this. So it's not as concentrated as other forms. It's a lighter form of the scent, but it definitely does carry some of the power of that plant in there. So we're going to go for some very attractive scents: jasmine, rose, and lang lang. These three are very strong that have to do with energies of love and attraction. So I'm going to start out with, I think, lang lang. There's one. Okay. Jasmine. And then finally, the rose. Anything with rose in it is very, very valuable. So I always kind of save that for the last thing. And there we go. And then always just, because why not? There we go. Okay. Mixing it again clockwise. You got to smell it before you go to the next layer because then you're going to know how much to add. That's pretty good so far. Okay. So now we're ready to add the essential oils. The difference between that and, say, a floral water is the essential oils actually come from pressing the blossom or pressing the plant. So you need a lot more of the plant in order to do that. So they're going to be much more expensive. When it's an essential oil, it's the most essential part of the plant, of the blossom, whatever you're working with. These are going to be very, very concentrated. You'll actually only need a few drops, unless you're making a spray of about 75 for an entire batch like we are. So when you see me dumping this in, this is not something to turn around and go home thinking that you're going to be dropping in about 20 to 30 drops into anything, because that's going to be very strong. You also cannot put any essential oil directly on your skin because it's so concentrated that you will react to it. So you want to dilute it in an oil. Now I'm already diluting it in this base here, and I'm going to dilute it even further when we add the moon water. But if you put it directly on your skin, you can have a reaction because, you know, if you're allergic to, say, roses, if you put one drop on, that's equivalent to about 300 roses. So not a good idea. This one, I'm probably going to add this one first because this is a rose wood, and that's one of the lower notes. When you're working with essential oils, you have low notes, mid notes, and high notes. So a low note would be anything like a wood or more woodsy fragrance like patchouli. It's more of a base scent. Then you have the mid notes, which are more like citruses, and then you have the high notes, which would be, say, something like jasmine. So when you are doing this, you've got to make sure that you're not just throwing in random essential oils. You've got to balance them properly. Maybe the low notes, they correspond with the body, the mid notes with the mind, and the high notes with the spirit. So you want to harmonize everything in one perfect concoction. And not enough people think of that. Okay, now you see what I'm doing here. Okay, this is a ridiculous amount of essential oil. Okay, but I'm going to need that much. Another low note. Now some of the low notes, because they're a little bit more like resins, tree saps, things like that, it's going to take a while. That might have a lot to do with why it's relaxing. It's not the quickest process in the world. Good. And it's a weird thing, I don't necessarily count the drops. It just kind of lets me know when it's done. Kind of like the way you communicate with a plant. You don't always know when to water it, but when it gets your attention, I should probably water that plant. It's talking to you. You're listening. That's good. Okay. So we have oils for beauty. This might be for energy, more of an uplifting type of thing. This is actually smelling really good right now. That's enough. See the size of this jasmine? That's a lot. Hence why it takes a long time to come out of the bottle. That's kind of the secret of attraction. When you want to attract something, sometimes you got to put the time and the effort in, but it's worth it. Orange always goes into attraction. It's a very happy scent, very uplifting, a nice mid-note. Just brings everything up to a very high level. And then, right before I go to the real high notes here, this one ingredient is very important. We want to make sure we're attracting the right thing, because you don't want to be like this nice bright bulb attracting a bunch of moths. So we want to make sure that there's one thing in there that's a little defensive, that makes sure that you are selectively attracting just enough. If you don't hit the balance just right, this can stink up the whole thing. So let's try that. Yeah, just right. Now, lavender. Yes, it's a lot, I know. The rose oil. And then finally, the magical oils. So these are kind of blends of other oils that are put together at the specific right intent. We're going to start with a little bit of musk. It really ties into the primal level of attraction. It ties in a little bit more to the physical. This one might be to create a spark. All right, now, most important part of the process. I'm never happy with it the moment I finish it. Then I gotta go back and re-add. So let's see. Yep. Okay, so then by smell, what does it need? All right, this one needs a little bit more of the rose, believe it or not. So, and probably one more floral. So, let's see, one more rose. And I'm thinking jasmine, but I don't want to go as heavy on the jasmine, so I'm actually going to go back to the floral water for a second. There we go. Yes. Okay. Now I'm going to add one more thing. So this is kind of my master potion that goes in all of the candles, all of the spell kits. This in particular is going to be the Love and Attraction Potion. This is so ultra concentrated. I only make them once a year. Okay, I make them every year on Samhain. Now I will strengthen them. I'll put them back in a fairy ring at midnight on Beltane, same thing. So I'm constantly activating them and working with them. So when I start adding this potion, because it lasts the entire year, you only need a few drops. That's it. And we do a final. Yep. So right now it's perfect. It's ready to get the final ingredient, which will be the moon water. Sorry. This is the witchy workout 101. This water is actually mountain spring water that was collected locally. I always save these jugs, and at the right moon phase, I always go right, usually on the peak of the full moon, I will go with these jugs and I'll collect it from a spring that I found, not too far from here, because it's important if it's local. And I'll do a little blessing over the spring, and then I will collect the water. Okay, that's perfect. So now I'm going to put it in the jug that I would normally have it in when I'm going to make the sprays for an entire batch. So I got to switch this over to another jar and then add the rest of this. I like to throw salt into the base before I do the final pour because salt is good for protection. It's also good for grounding, but that's a pink salt. That's also a very healing type. It's been blessed with rose oils. It's been put out under the full moon. It heals the heart. When you are attracting things, to an extent, you have to open up your heart to these things. So you've got to make sure that your heart is in a very healed state. And then, of course, the 3 rosebuds. That's just going to add attraction on all different types of levels. I've got some pink salt here, bam. And then I've got 3 rosebuds. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now we're ready to add this. I already took the crystal out, so I don't have to worry about it. There we go. Right to the top of that line right there. Okay. I'm also going to put a little bit of intention into it. Once it's made, then I would let this sit for a little while. I usually let it sit for about 24 hours before I bottle because I want to get a sense of how all of these ingredients are going to marinate together. If I just poured it right away, I don't know how it's going to smell when somebody finally gets it off of the shelf. I don't have an idea of how they've all blended together, so I need to give it 24 hours in order to do that.